Eamon stood in front of her mother with determination in her eyes. I want to go to college, she insisted, her voice carrying both urgency and fear. I don't care how you convince him, but you must talk to father. I need his permission to continue my studies. Her mother froze for a moment, visibly unsettled. With a weary sigh, she whispered, You know how your father feels about girls pursuing education. He has never supported such ideas. If I speak to him, he will refuse outright. Iman's frustration boiled over. Father never approves of anything I do. It feels as though even my existence is a burden to him. Should I simply stop living then? You must speak to him, Mother. I cannot allow my life to be limited within these walls. Her mother remained silent, weighed down by years of compromise, but something in Iman's tone carried conviction she had never shown before. After a long pause, she promised to try. Days later, against all expectations, her father reluctantly gave his consent. Iman could hardly believe it. A new chapter had opened in her life, one she had dreamed about for years. With joy swelling inside her, she prepared herself for the world outside. Soon, her father arranged for her to be escorted to college by their longtime servant, an elderly man she fondly addressed as uncle. He had been loyal to the family for decades, responsible and protective. Each morning, he would take her to college and bring her safely back home. But fate intervened. The old servant's health deteriorated and he resigned. His absence shook Eamon deeply. College was not just a dream now, it was her lifeline. Without him, how could she continue? Days passed in restless worry until one evening, her mother shared unexpected news. Your father has arranged someone new for you, she said. A younger man will take you to college, bring you home, and watch over the house at night. The next morning, Iman stepped out of her room prepared for the routine journey, but what she saw made her heart skip a beat. Standing near the car was not another elderly caretaker, but a strikingly handsome young man. His presence was commanding, his demeanor calm, and his sharp features caught the morning light in a way that made her stare in disbelief. She was stunned that her father would entrust her safety to someone so young and unfamiliar. Questions raced in her mind, yet underneath the confusion stirred an unspoken thrill she could not explain. From the very first ride with Noman, Iman sensed something different. She sat in the back seat, quietly watching the streets pass by, but every now and then her eyes were drawn to the rearview mirror. There, she caught him glancing at her, not openly, but with a subtle curiosity that sent a shiver racing down her spine. Each time their eyes met, she quickly turned away, pretending to be interested in the scenery outside, yet her heart beat faster than ever before. At first, she convinced herself it was only her imagination. He was, after all, hired by her father to ensure her safety. Why would he look at her differently? But as the days turned into weeks, she began to notice a pattern. When he thought she wasn't watching, his gaze lingered in the mirror just a second longer than necessary. It was not bold enough to be inappropriate, yet not ordinary enough to be dismissed. Something unspoken was forming between them, delicate yet powerful. Their conversations remained minimal. Each morning he would greet her respectfully, ask whether she was ready, and then drive in silence. Sometimes on the way home, he would politely inquire about the time of her next class or exam. His words were always measured, his tone calm. Yet, to Amen, even those small exchanges became precious. She carried them with her throughout the day, replaying them in her mind as though they were hidden treasures. She began to notice details about him that no one else seemed to pay attention to. His deep voice when he spoke on the phone with his friends, the way he laughed softly, the seriousness in his eyes when he focused on the road. She found herself listening intently to his conversations, even when they had nothing to do with her. Every word, every gesture etched itself into her thoughts, and later, alone in her room, she would recall them, smiling unconsciously. It frightened her to realize what was happening. These feelings were foreign, overwhelming, and yet irresistible. She was supposed to focus on her studies, to honor her mother's struggle in securing permission from her father. But love has a way of defying reason. Slowly, without her consent, Noman's presence began to fill her heart. By the time she acknowledged the truth, it was already too late. She had fallen deeply, helplessly in love. The once ordinary rides to college had become the highlight of her day. Each journey was now a silent confession, a moment suspended between fear and longing. She did not know what he truly felt for her, but she knew her life was no longer the same. The more Eamon observed Noman, the more her admiration deepened. He was unlike anyone she had ever known, disciplined, hardworking, and remarkably loyal to her family. Every morning after dropping her at college, he returned to the house to complete various chores, only to wake again in the afternoon to pick her up. At night, while the rest of the household slept peacefully, he remained awake, guarding the gates like a silent protector. Sometimes, when Eamon studied late into the night, she would glance through her bedroom window and see him pacing the courtyard, alert to every sound. His presence gave her a sense of safety she could not describe. It was as though he carried the weight of the family's honor on his shoulders. He did not complain, he did not rest, he simply fulfilled every duty assigned to him. Her father had grown extremely fond of him, praising his loyalty at every opportunity. "This young man is a blessing," he would often say. "Strong, trustworthy, and devoted. In his hands, I feel my home and my daughter are safe." Eamon would silently agree, though her reasons went far beyond her father's. To her, Noman was not just a servant or a protector. He was someone whose existence had become central to her own. The story of how he had entered their lives was already a tale her father repeated proudly. Months earlier, on a journey back from the city, her father's car had been attacked by armed bandits. They had planned to kidnap him for ransom, but fate had other plans. At that very moment, Noman happened to be passing by on his motorbike. Alone and unarmed, he had bravely confronted the attackers. With sheer strength and fearlessness, he fought them back until her father could retrieve his weapon from the car. Together, they had forced the men to retreat. Impressed by his courage, her father offered him a position in the household. Noman revealed that he had once been a wrestler, trained to take down multiple opponents at once. His skills, combined with his loyalty, made him the perfect guardian in her father's eyes. From that day forward, he had become an inseparable part of their household. For Eamon, however, his role extended far deeper than protection. She admired his discipline, respected his silence, and cherished the quiet glances they occasionally shared. Each passing day pulled her closer into an invisible bond she could no longer ignore. What troubled her most was the secrecy of her emotions. She could not speak of them to her mother, nor could she confide in any friend. Her love for Noman had become her most guarded secret, a flame burning silently within her heart, bright enough to guide her, yet dangerous enough to destroy everything if exposed. Though Eamon tried to keep her emotions hidden, her mother's watchful eyes seemed to sense that something had changed. One evening, as they sat together in the courtyard, her mother spoke in a tone that carried both love and caution. "My daughter, remember this well, your father finally agreed to your education after much persuasion. Do not do anything that could make him regret his decision. A girl's respect is like a delicate thread. Once broken, it cannot be repaired." The words struck Eamon like a warning bell. Her heart raced, wondering if her mother had somehow guessed the secret that she was desperately trying to conceal. Did her mother notice the way her eyes lit up when Noman entered the room? Did she sense the unspoken emotions hiding behind her silence? For a moment, fear gripped her, fear that her carefully guarded feelings were no longer invisible. But her mother said no more, simply returning to her chores as if nothing had been revealed. Eamon tried to reassure herself. She couldn't possibly know, she thought. She is only giving me the same advice she always gives. Be cautious, protect the family's name. And yet, in her heart, the unease lingered. That night, as she prepared her books for the next day, Eamon stood by the window and glanced outside. There, as always, was Noman, alert and strong, pacing back and forth with silent vigilance. A strange comfort washed over her, mixed with a guilt she could not escape. She knew her mother's warning was not without reason. A single misstep could bring shame upon her, her mother, and the entire household. And yet, the pull of her heart was stronger than any fear. By now, Noman had become more than just a servant in her eyes. He was the quiet guardian of her days and nights, the silent companion who shared the long drives to college, the man whose mere presence brought her peace. Love had wrapped itself around her so tightly that she could no longer imagine a life without it. Still, she kept her silence. She did not dare speak of her feelings, not even to her closest friends. The thought of her father discovering the truth terrified her. She had seen how harsh he could be when angered, how sternly he treated even her mother. If he ever learned of her secret, the consequences would be unimaginable. Eamon pressed her shawl tightly around her shoulders and whispered a silent prayer. She hoped her love would remain hidden, untouched by suspicion. But in the depths of her heart, she knew the truth. Such secrets have a way of finding their way to light. By the time her final exams arrived, Eamon had grown into a young woman who carried a secret universe within her heart. The long rides to college, once filled with silence and unspoken emotions, had become the very rhythm of her days. Every glance in the rearview mirror, every careful word exchanged had woven a bond she could no longer deny. Still, she remained cautious, her mother's warnings echoing in her mind like distant bells. On the day of her last paper, she felt strangely heavy. The thought of no longer traveling with Noman every morning and afternoon unsettled her. Would this closeness vanish once her college days ended? Would their connection fade into silence? She tried to push these thoughts away, but they clung to her like shadows. As they drove back that day, Noman's demeanor was different. His usual calmness seemed replaced with a restless energy. Halfway down the road, he suddenly slowed the car and pulled over to the side. Eamon's breath caught in her throat. He gripped the steering wheel for a moment before turning slightly toward her. "There is something I have wanted to say for a long time," he began, his voice low and hesitant. "But I have been afraid." Her heart raced. Every nerve in her body seemed to tremble in anticipation. "What is it?" she whispered, unable to hide her eagerness. He paused, searching her face as though weighing every word. Then with quiet determination, he spoke. "I cannot imagine my life without you. These years of driving you to college, protecting your family, being near you, they have changed me. I care for you in a way I cannot put into ordinary words. I want you to be part of my future." For a moment, Eamon could only stare, her eyes wide, her breath caught. It was as if he had spoken the very words her heart had been longing to hear. Heat rushed to her cheeks and tears welled in her eyes. Finally, with trembling lips, she confessed, "I feel the same. I have tried to hide it even from myself, but I cannot anymore. I love you too." Noman reached across and gently held her hand. His eyes shone with a mixture of relief and passion. "Do not be afraid," he said softly. "I will face the world for you. I will even face your father if I must. I cannot lose you, Eamon. Not now, not ever." She lowered her gaze, her heart pounding wildly. The joy of hearing his love filled her completely, yet fear lingered. She knew that her father's reaction to such a revelation would be anything but merciful. But at that moment, sitting in the stillness of the car with Noman's hand wrapped around hers, she let herself dream. For the first time, she felt both the beauty and the danger of love collide within her soul. The joy of hearing Noman's confession still lingered in Ayman's heart as she returned home that evening. Her cheeks glowed with a faint blush and her steps felt lighter than air. For the first time, she believed her dreams were not impossible. She imagined a future filled with companionship, love, and freedom, so unlike the cold marriage her parents shared. But the fragile world she had built within her heart crumbled within hours. As soon as she entered the house, her mother's expression unsettled her. There was no warmth in her eyes, only the weight of news too heavy to soften. "Some guests came today," her mother began carefully. "They brought a proposal for you. They belong to a respected family in the nearby village. Their son is preparing to go abroad and he wishes to take his wife with him. They saw you and liked you instantly. Your father has agreed." Eamon froze. The words struck her like thunder. She could hardly breathe, hardly believe what she was hearing. Only hours earlier, Noman had taken her hand and promised her a future. Only hours earlier, she had whispered her own love in return. Now, that fragile dream was being shattered without a second thought. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at her mother, silently pleading for some sign of compassion. "How can you do this to me? I don't even know that man. I don't want to live a life like yours, silenced, unloved, waiting for someone who never cares. I don't want to be another shadow in a man's house." Her voice trembled with pain, but her mother only lowered her gaze. "My child," she said softly, "not every fate is the same. Your father believes this is the best match for you. They are wealthy, respected. You will not lack comfort or security. My life may not have been happy, but I pray yours will be different." But her mother's attempt at reassurance only deepened Eamon's despair. She had seen enough of her father's harshness to know what awaited her in such a marriage: obedience, fear, and loneliness. She thought of Noman's hand holding hers, his voice whispering promises of love. The contrast tore her apart. That night, in the privacy of her room, she wept bitterly. She pressed her face into her pillow, muffling her cries so no one would hear. She wanted to scream, to rebel, but she felt powerless. For the first time, she realized that the walls of her home were not just walls, they were a cage. And inside that cage, her heart was breaking. Eamon's world felt as though it was collapsing around her. Days passed in a blur of forced smiles and endless silence. Preparations for her marriage began quickly as her father wasted no time in finalizing arrangements with the wealthy landowner's family. Every step taken toward the wedding felt like a dagger piercing deeper into her heart. She moved through the house like a shadow, her soul weighed down by sorrow. Unable to bear the torment any longer, she sought out Noman. She found him near the courtyard one evening, his expression as restless as her own. The moment their eyes met, he seemed to understand the storm raging inside her. Without hesitation, he walked closer, his voice low and urgent. "What is happening, Eamon? Why do you look so pale? Tell me the truth." Tears welled up as she whispered, "They have fixed my marriage. The guests came yesterday and my father agreed. The wedding will happen within weeks." "Noman, what am I supposed to do? How can I leave you after everything we have shared?" Her voice broke as she covered her face with trembling hands. For a long moment, Noman said nothing. Then, with intensity in his eyes, he spoke. "We cannot let this happen. I cannot watch you slip away into a life you don't want. If you marry that man, you will live in the same prison your mother has endured for years. You deserve better than that. You deserve love. You deserve me." Eamon's breath caught. His words were bold, dangerous, but they resonated with the deepest desires of her heart, yet fear gripped her. "What are you suggesting?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Noman leaned closer. "Come away with me. Leave this house, leave this life. We will start somewhere new, far from here. I will protect you, and together we will build a future that belongs only to us." Her heart raced violently. The idea was terrifying, yet intoxicating. She thought of her parents, their honor, the inevitable disgrace if she fled. "I cannot betray them," she whispered. "They will never forgive me." He shook his head, his voice steady. "They may be angry for a while, but anger fades. Love does not. Think about it. Can you live without me? Because I cannot live without you." The weight of his words pressed heavily upon her. In her heart, she knew the truth. She could not imagine a life without him. That night, alone in her room, she replayed his plea over and over again. Fear battled with love, duty clashed with desire. By dawn, she realized she was already leaning toward the choice she once thought impossible. The weight of Noman's words stayed with Eamon long after their conversation ended. She tried to resist the thought, tried to bury it under duty and fear, but it refused to leave her mind. "Can you live without me?" he had asked, and each time she repeated the question to herself, the answer was the same. No, she could not. The love that had quietly grown between them was now too powerful to deny. That night, while her parents slept, she sat by her window staring at the dark sky. Her heart trembled with both fear and longing. She thought of her mother's sacrifices, of her father's stern commands, of the expectations tied around her shoulders like chains. Then she thought of Noman, his strength, his loyalty, his promise of a life built on love. The decision tore her apart, but she finally surrendered to her heart. At midnight, her phone vibrated. A short message from Noman flashed on the screen. "I am waiting. This is our only chance." Her pulse raced. She wrapped herself in the black shawl she always wore to college, the same one her mother had once told her to protect like a symbol of dignity. With trembling steps, she slipped out of her room and into the night. Noman was waiting near the gate with a car he had arranged. He opened the door quickly, his face tense but determined. Without a word, she slid inside. The car roared to life, and within moments, her family home, the only world she had ever known, faded into the distance. For the first hour, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and desperate hopes. Eamon clutched her shawl tightly, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. As dawn crept closer, Noman finally slowed the car and turned off the road toward a small, secluded village. He stopped before a modest house with 3 rooms and a rusted gate. "This is where we will stay," he said quietly. "It is safe, hidden. No one will think to look for us here." Eamon stepped out, staring at the tiny house in disbelief. Born and raised in a sprawling estate, she had never imagined herself in such a place. The walls seemed too narrow, the air too quiet. Fear prickled her skin. Still, she reminded herself of her choice: love over comfort, freedom over confinement. As she followed him inside, her heart pounded violently. For the first time, they were truly alone, bound together not by circumstance, but by a decision that could never be undone. Yet beneath her nervousness, a shadow of doubt crept in. Had she traded one prison for another? Inside the small house, the silence was overwhelming. Ayman looked around the dimly lit room, trying to steady her racing heart. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse, and the air carried the scent of dust and abandonment. This was nothing like the home she had left behind, yet she reminded herself that love was supposed to make such sacrifices worthwhile. Still, an uneasy feeling began to stir within her. Noman seemed strangely calm. He moved about the house as though he had rehearsed this moment for years. Lighting a lantern, he turned to her with a faint smile. "We will stay here for a few days, just until things settle. Then when the time is right, we will plan our future." His words should have reassured her, but instead they unsettled her further. Something in his tone carried a weight she could not quite name. Gathering courage, Ayman spoke softly. "You promised me we would be married as soon as we left home. You said you had arranged everything. Where's the person who will conduct the ceremony? Where are the witnesses?" Her eyes searched his face, desperate for an answer that would calm her doubts. For a moment, Noman was silent. Then a strange smile curved his lips, one that sent chills down her spine. "You really are innocent," he said slowly, "so trusting. I almost pity you." Her blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice trembling. His expression hardened. "Do you not see, Ayman? I never wanted to marry you. I never loved you. My goal was never your heart, it was your father. I wanted to see his pride crushed, his honor destroyed, just as he once destroyed my family." Her knees weakened, and she stumbled back against the wall, her world shattering in an instant. He continued, his voice sharp with anger. "Years ago, your father wronged my sister, humiliated her, and left her to despair until she took her own life. Her death broke my parents. I lost them all. Since then, I have lived only for revenge. And you were my weapon." Tears blurred Ayman's vision as she stared at him in disbelief. Every memory, the glances, the promises, the tender words felt like cruel illusions now. "So this was never love?" she asked brokenly. "No," he said coldly. "It was justice." Ayman's heart clenched with grief and terror. She had given him her trust, her dreams, even her future, only to discover that she had been walking into a trap all along. Ayman's breath caught in her throat, her body frozen, as Noman's words echoed in the stillness of the small house. Her heart felt as though it had been torn open. The man she had loved with all her innocence, the man she believed would protect her, had only used her as a pawn in his revenge. She wanted to scream, to cry, to collapse, but her voice failed her. Before she could gather herself, the creak of the door startled them both. Standing there, framed in the pale light of dawn, was her father. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes heavy with despair. He had aged years in a single night. Ayman stared at him, torn between relief and fear. She expected fury, punishment, perhaps even violence. Instead, he looked at her with broken eyes, and then turned to Noman. "I heard everything," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "Every word you spoke about your sister, about your pain." He stepped further inside, his head bowed. "It is true. I wronged your family. I destroyed lives without a thought, blinded by arrogance and pride. But today, when I saw my own daughter slipping from my hands, I finally understood the torment I once caused. I deserve your hatred, but I beg you, forgive me. Do not destroy her to punish me. She is innocent." Noman faltered, his anger flickering. For the first time, he seemed uncertain. He looked at Ayman, her tear-streaked face trembling with fear, then back at her father, who stood humbled, hands clasped together in remorse. The scene before him was not one of victory, but of defeat. His revenge had already broken the very person who had no fault. A heavy silence filled the room. Then, without another word, Noman turned and walked out into the morning light, leaving everything behind: his vengeance, his anger, and the girl whose trust he had betrayed. Her father moved to her side, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Come, my daughter," he whispered. "This was my punishment, not yours. You will not carry the burden of my sins." Back at home, her mother's face was pale with worry. The moment she saw Eamon, she rushed forward and struck her cheek in anguish, but tears quickly replaced her anger. Her father stopped her, his voice firm yet gentle. "Do not blame her. This was my test and my reckoning. I see now what I refused to see for years, that the sins we commit return to us one way or another." Days later, Aymen was married into the family her parents had chosen, but this time she carried a heart transformed by wisdom. To her surprise, her husband was kind, respectful, and nothing like the men she had feared. Slowly, she found the peace she thought she had lost forever. Her father, too, changed. For the first time, he treated her mother with tenderness, acknowledging the sacrifices she had endured in silence. The entire household began to heal, not through pride, but through humility and repentance. As Aymen looked back, she realized that love built on deception cannot survive, but a life shaped by truth, forgiveness, and faith can still bloom, even after the darkest storm.